Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll continue looking at the Saw movies and how to beat them. After the first 3 entries comes Saw 4, which has some of the most complex and extreme traps yet. Here we follow Daniel Rigg, who must play one of Jigsaw's games to save his friends, and like always there's a major twist at the end. I was happy to see that Saw 4 features a good blend of traps that are both really difficult and pretty easy to beat. With that being said, let's look at how you can survive Saw 4. This one starts off with the autopsy of John Kramer following his death in Saw 3. In his head, the coroners find a piece of a skull that was removed by Lynn. They continue cutting him open to examine his other organs. Inside his stomach, they find a tape covered in wax that John swallowed in the previous movie. They immediately call the police to show it to them, and soon after, Detective Hoffman arrives to play it. On the tape, he hears a message from John warning him that he will also be tested, and even though he's dead, John's games will continue without him. We cut to 2 men waking up in an abandoned mausoleum. One of them, Trevor, has his eyes sewn shut, and the other, Art Blank, has his mouth sewn shut. They're both connected to the ends of a chain by their collars. The chain slowly gets pulled towards the trap in the middle, and if it drags them all the way in, they get strangled to death. Trevor accidentally activates the trap and their test begins. Art sees that they're supposed to get the key which unlocks their collar off of Trevor's neck. They can both survive here if they work together and manage to get the key. The blind guy notices he's given access to many sharp tools and hammers which he throws at Art out of fear, thinking he's here to hurt him. Since Art is the only one who can see, their survival really depends on him. One thing he can do is take this small sharp axe, which was one of the things Trevor threw at him, and use it to cut the thread that holds his mouth shut. Then they could communicate and work together to unlock their collars. He can also use the axe to cut the wires to the motor that tightens the chain. That way the chain doesn't get pulled and no one could be strangled. However, this trap is only beatable from Art's perspective, but not from the blind guy. Even if Trevor killed Art, who he thought was a threat, that doesn't stop the machine. He's just thrown in this scenario without an explanation or chance to survive. Art ends up killing Trevor and retrieves the key to free himself. Then he forces his mouth open for no reason. He could have just done that earlier and talked with Trevor. He'd explain that he's not a threat and what they have to do. They would both get the key, unlock their collars, and live. It's mentioned in the extra footage that Art didn't open his mouth out of fear that he might do something wrong, but it still seems like a better option than dying or killing someone. After the title card, a SWAT team enters a dark basement. There, the officers find Alice and Carrie dead in the angel trap. Daniel Rigg, the man we've seen in the previous movies, is also here, and he's deeply troubled by Jigsaw's games as he already lost 2 co-workers to the killer. Later on, FBI agents Lindsay Perez and Peter Strom arrive and conclude that Amanda wasn't the only one helping John. She couldn't have put Allison into the trap herself as she would have been too heavy for Amanda to lift, meaning that another unknown person is helping Jigsaw. Later that night, Rigg gets overpowered and sedated by someone in a pig mask at his house. He wakes up in his own bathroom and finds a big red question mark on the door. After going into the bedroom and getting his gun, the TV turns on. The puppet appears and explains that tonight Rigg will get the opportunity to save Eric. It's revealed that Amanda didn't actually kill Eric in Saw 3 but only knocked him unconscious. He was then held as a prisoner and got put into a new trap. He's currently standing on a block of melting ice while hanging from his neck. Rigg is told that he can find the clues to Eric's location by playing Jigsaw's game, but he only has 90 minutes before the ice melts and Eric suffocates. The trap is beatable, but there are a lot more crucial details that are shown later on. When it's done playing, he goes into his living room where he finds a woman in a trap. It's mentioned that she's a prostitute who Jigsaw deems unworthy of life. Now, Rigg doesn't have to help her. He's even advised by Jigsaw to simply walk away and focus on saving Eric, but he tries saving her anyway. In this test, she's chained to a chair secured by a combination lock, and her hair is tied around a twisting bar. As the bar rotates, it pulls stronger and stronger on her hair. This continues until her scalp is pulled off. The trap starts and slowly pulls out her hair in short intervals. Rigg tries firing at it, but that doesn't work. One major thing mentioned by others is that he could shoot her hair and not the trap, or shoot the wires supplying electricity to the motor twisting the bar. He can also try to jam up the gears that turn the bar with the metal gun. That way she is instantly freed and Rigg wouldn't have wasted any time. Instead, he tries searching for a knife to cut the hair. Unfortunately, all of his knives have been taken out. However, there is a broken picture frame where he could use the glass as a knife. Another solution is breaking the pot of this flour and using that as a blade. He goes back and tries to solve this puzzle by finding numbers written on the gears, which is the combination to a lock. But he needs to hurry because her hair is quickly being ripped off. Eventually, Rigg gets the code and frees her. You'd think she'd be thankful, but the woman reaches for a big knife and tries to stab him. Rigg overpowers her and kills her out of self-defense. As he tries to leave the house and find Eric, he sees 2 keys in the exit. There's also a note that reads, one of them gives life, the other one takes it away, which he takes and goes. The keys lead him to a cheap motel where he will be faced with another test. He enters the room for which he was given the key at his home. There, Rigg finds a new tape telling him that he needs to abduct the motel owner Ivan Landis and put him into a trap. Doing this will get him closer to finding Eric's location. Rigg lures Ivan into the room where Jigsaw wants him and forces the guy into his trap. The reason given for Ivan's trial is that he abused and tortured women in the past. Ivan puts himself into this strange contraption where his limbs are in chains that are connected to metal beams at the edge of the bed. When that's all done, he puts his head in a vise. Rigg then finds the next clue and leaves him alone to face his test. He doesn't really want to help him after what he's done. In the bed, Ivan is told to press 2 triggers which cause 2 spikes to poke into his eyes, making him permanently blind. If he doesn't do this, the metal beams connected to his limbs will pull away and rip off his arms and legs. It's a pretty bizarre trap. I had to re-watch this like 3 times before I understood what the hell is even happening here. But you either lose your eyes or you lose your life. This one is very tough to beat without doing what's intended because you're once again completely tied down. What Ivan could try is using his arm, leg, and neck muscles all together to try and slightly shift his head in the vise. If he moves it as little as an inch down, the spikes would go over his eyes and into his forehead. And I doubt that they are powerful enough to break the skull, as it tends to take a lot more resistance. The spikes are also just meant to slightly dig into his eyes so they don't push that hard. He winds up pressing the first trigger and loses one of his eyes, but the time runs out before he can hit the second one. The trap goes off and tears off his limbs, resulting in his death. Now we're in Eric's room and we see that Hoffman is sitting next to him. Eric becomes tired of Jigsaw's games and jumps off the ice block to end it all. It's shown that the two are on opposite ends of a scale, which now leans to Hoffman's side with the ice block's water running towards him. As the ice melts further, more water flows towards Hoffman, and if enough fluid is there, the scale tips to his side and he will be electrocuted. The man overseeing them puts Eric back on the ice block so the game can continue. It's then revealed that the hooded man is Art Blank, the guy from the first trap with his mouth sewn shut. Back in Jigsaw's game, Rigg's clues lead him to an abandoned school. He enters the door to the next trap. Here he finds a couple tied to a pole, and the people are Rex and Morgan. The woman suddenly wakes up and tells Rigg that she had already beaten her trap. In a flashback, we see that they both woke up tied to the pole with multiple steel rods pierced through their bodies. The spikes go in through Morgan and out through Rex. She played the tape which tells her that to survive, she needs to pull the rods out of her body, which kills her husband. Or she can leave the spikes in and bleed to death but her husband lives. The rods are placed so that the woman needs to remove them for her wounds to heal, but the guy needs to keep them in so he doesn't bleed out. And since Rex has very little power left, the choice is up to Morgan. The game begins and she doesn't hesitate to pull out the rods. She pretty much hates her husband because he physically harmed both her and their child numerous times in the past. She pulled out most of the rods, which led to Rex dying. Now Rigg can choose to give her the key to help her out of the trap. But first he removes the final rod from her body and searches the classroom. There he finds the final clue to Eric's location, the Gideon meatpacking plant from Saw 3. Rigg walks out of the room and gives Morgan the key, saying she needs to save herself. She then uses the key and unlocks herself from the trap. However, she wouldn't have needed to remove the last rod. Instead, she can just unlock herself from the trap and step off with the rod still inside her. She would be pulling it out of her husband, but not herself. The paramedics arrive soon after, so she would survive with a lot less pain. The only way I see both of them surviving is if Morgan only removes one of the steel rods. Then she can take the rod's sharp end and cut the leather straps that tie her to the pole. Alternatively, she can use the rod to try and get the projector to smash the glass part, using the shards to cut the straps. After the straps are cut, she could release herself in a way that she pulls the rods out of herself but leaves them in the husband. That way Rex has a much higher probability of not bleeding out. Even though cutting leather can sometimes be really tough, she does have quite a bit of time. But the woman manages to survive on her own, and maybe it's better she freed herself from her husband. The FBI agents arrive at the classroom minutes later. Morgan did survive and tells them that Rigg saved her. Perez then gets a call and figures out that all the people in this game are criminals, and everyone is represented by the same lawyer, Art Blank, the guy monitoring Eric and Hoffman. Back with Eric, he again tries to jump off the block but fails and is put back. Art then tells him that he simply needs to wait out the remaining time and is free to go. He then gives Eric a revolver with one bullet, telling him to use it carefully. Meanwhile, Strom finds John's ex-girlfriend Jill and asks her what's going on. In a flashback, she tells him that Art Blank and John knew each other quite well in the past. The two were business partners in a construction project. However, after getting cancer, John wanted out and instead focused on setting up these crazy games to kill people. It's then revealed in a flashback within a flashback that Jill was pregnant with John's baby. Unfortunately, she had a miscarriage when a man named Cecil slammed a door in her stomach during a robbery. Not long after, John set up a trap for him. A few days later, Cecil was kidnapped and sedated. He wakes up in a room strapped to a chair while John is still setting up the trap. He tries to free himself but notices blades underneath his hands, meaning that he can't use them. Cecil tries to reason with John, but following 2 minutes of talking, a box of knives is put in front of his face. What he needs to do is lean forward into the blades, and if he goes far enough and hits this bar with his head, the hand and leg restraints are opened and he beats the trap. He slowly leans forward into the knives and it looks quite painful. But eventually he manages to free himself. Unfortunately, he tries to attack John but stumbles and falls into a bed of razor wire and dies. Now Cecil's key advantage here is that he wakes up before John puts the knives on his head, and that John gives his 5-minute villain speech where he walks around the lair. This is very important because if you look very closely at his hands, you can see that they are being held in place by this handcuff thing, which is locked by these pins. The good news is that they're completely accessible from the start, so while John is walking around the lair, Cecil can bend down and pull the pins out with his mouth. Then the locks to his hands would open and he could free himself and escape, or kill John. The pins are also connected to this bar which he can hit with his head, exactly like he would have to do when the knives are there, just without the blades. I'm confident this would work because when John puts the contraption on his head, he never touches the bar with the triggers again. There wasn't anything else that was activated. I think John simply hoped that Cecil wouldn't notice. Once the knives are on your head, you can try pushing through them with your hair first to have at least a little bit more resistance, and there's a lot less visible scarring afterwards. We go back to Jill talking to John, who tells her to leave him alone, so they broke up and are no longer together. When that flashback is done, we're back in Jill's interrogation. Strom takes a quick break and finds a newspaper that shows where Eric and Hoffman might be. He yells at Jill to tell him where it is, even though the location is right there in the picture. Meanwhile, Rigg arrives at the meatpacking plant. Eric, Art, and Hoffman then see that the door is rigged to a mechanism that releases 2 big ice blocks that will smash Eric's head if someone opens it. Eventually, Strom also enters the building. Back in the room, Art reveals that he has a spine cutter strapped to his back. It turns out that after the mausoleum test, Art had this device put onto his back and was forced to set up and oversee this game. If the 90 minutes run out and the door is not opened, the device will unlock. However, if someone goes through it, it's automatically activated and cuts the spine. So for Eric and Art to survive, Rigg cannot find them. This goes directly against what Rigg thinks because he's trying to get to Eric to save him. Then we see that this movie takes place at the same time as the third film, meaning that Jeff and Rigg's games are happening simultaneously. Rigg approaches Eric's room and is about to enter. Eric screams to not open the door, but Rigg can't really hear him. As he comes closer, Eric shoots him, but he still walks in. The ice blocks drop and kill Eric. Rigg also shoots Art in the chest, thinking he's the killer. The scale then tips to Hoffman's side, meaning that he should get electrocuted. However, Rigg, Art, and Hoffman are all still alive. The injured Art reaches to play a tape, but Rigg thinks he's pulling a gun and shoots him. It starts playing and says that Rigg didn't need to find Eric to save him. All he had to do was wait out the time. The whole game was a test to see if Rigg could let go of his obsession to help everyone. Such a good prank. Hoffman then comes up behind him and it's revealed that he was John's accomplice the whole time. But how can Eric and Art Blank beat their traps and survive? Okay, really quick guys, this was one of the tougher traps, so my solution isn't the greatest, but if you have any suggestions, make sure to let me know in the comments. When Rigg approaches, he hears Eric screaming, but doesn't notice he's telling him not to come inside. What Eric can do is shoot the window to the door before Rigg charges in. That way Rigg would either be scared off by the gunshot, or he would properly hear Eric and take his warning to not come in. The 1 second goes by and they all live. Of course, this method is a little speculative, still I think it's better than what Eric did, because he waited to shoot him until the last second where Rigg is already at the door rushing into the room. Firing off a warning shot a few seconds earlier seems more likely to buy him that 1 second, because if it's the police that wants to help him, the open window allows them to communicate. If it's a threat, scaring them off and delaying them with a warning shot seems like a better option than gambling on whether they're coming in and waiting up to the last moment. What Art can do is block the door with the desk, for example, which would stop Rigg from entering. He can also break the glass to the door, so when Rigg approaches, he can tell him not to enter or they all die, and Rigg has seen enough of Jigsaw's games to understand what that means. They only need to slow Rigg down for 1 second and they all live. Now Hoffman is of course in on the game and could intervene with Art at any moment, but if he would do that and get out of his chair to stop Art, Eric could easily put 1 and 1 together and realize that he's in on it. So he would probably use the gun to shoot Hoffman, and even though Amanda is also monitoring the game, at this time she had already been shot by Jeff, so Art could try blocking the door and no one would give him orders against it. It's at the very least worth a try when facing certain death as Rigg enters, because it's either maybe you live or definitely die. Anyways, at the same time Strom is standing in front of the room where Amanda shot Lynn and Jeff killed John. He walks into the room and Jeff aims a gun at him. Strom shoots him and sees that everyone in the room is dead. Hoffman then exits the meatpacking plant, leaving the injured Rigg there and locking Strom in his room. And that's, by the way, why the tape in the beginning told Hoffman that he won't get away untested. John still wants a real trial for Hoffman. That's it for this video. Again, let me know how you would beat the traps. I hope you enjoyed it and that I get to see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye.